and some of us how to find these slides in class docs. And so I've been using, in fact, before I do that, let me just show you where you can find this information here. Oops, that's me again. If you go back to your, if you go back to our class oops, that's me again. If you go to the class or the website here, and you go basically to the main page that you have here, just the main data analytics page that we have together, you'll find that, and I know that I'm probably speaking to the choir here, you probably all know this, but you have these links which are down here, which are the Git links. And so that means that you now have access to the GitHub repository. And so really, now if you've heard this before, I'm speaking really to the people in the room who perhaps aren't familiar with Git. Basically what Git is a system of putting and archiving code on the cloud. In this class, I'm going to be using this not necessarily to keep code, but to keep like your documentation. Of course, I'll have code in there. But seemingly all your class materials are going to be put on your, you'll have a copy of everything. Everything I put out there, you'll have a copy. And so I'm going to put everything on this repository here. And so how do I open this thing up? Well, I'm going to go down to my SSH repository, which you see right there. I'm going to copy this. And then when I go to my terminal, I'm going to make a directory. How can I do this here? I'll just make it in temp now because I don't want it to stick around forever. Because I can just clone it again if I want it. I'm going to make a directory here. Oops. I'll just call this CD or make directory here. I'm going to say mkdir. That means make a directory here. And I'm going to call it CS312. And I do that because I want to be able to group my files here. If I'm taking more than one computer science class here, chances are you're going to have, well, every class is probably going to be using Git in some way. And so you'll have something like ClassDoc in every class, where they'll be giving you class materials. And so I'm going to go now into CS312, into this directory that I've just created. And by the by, if you feel more comfortable not using commands to make directories, and that's fine, whatever you do, I use the bash for all this stuff here. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to type in git clone, followed by, I'm going to paste this link that I got from here, from the SSH. Now this assumes, oops, actually I don't want to, I just want git clone once here, I don't want it twice. But I don't want to have, if you do this on GitHub, they don't give you that. They don't give you this git and clone, so you have to type this in yourself. But seemingly every time you run this command here, what it does when you type in git clone here, it goes out to the cloud, it finds all the files that I've left there, and it establishes a repository on your hard drive. Now, you don't need to type in git clone every time you run your git here. Instead, you'll find that, for instance, this new directory has just been made here, which is called ClassDocs. Oops. I can change directory into ClassDocs here. If I type in dir, I find lessons. And inside here, I find the stuff that we're working on this week and last week. Everything will be there, everything. So when it comes time to study, you can find these things. Now, what I was going to say is, you don't have to type in git clone every time you come to class. Instead, I want you to go to ClassDocs, just like this, and you type in git space pull. That's it, just 2 words. Push enter, and you see how it says here, everything is up to date? What that means is that nothing new is on the cloud. I haven't put anything in GitHub for this class in ClassDocs that you don't already have on your machine. And so what this is doing now is it's going to, it's just making sure that your files and the files that I've put out there in the cloud, on the GitHub cloud, are actually the same files. And it's absolutely essential that you do this every day because you're going to have new slides or code, or I'll have a sandbox for you where you have something to work with or some data. And so I'm going to be giving you actually a bunch of files. And it makes it much, much easier to diffuse these, to diffuse these files by basically giving them out in something like GitHub here. And so if anybody has any trouble trying to get GitHub work, please let me know and send me a mail or send me a Slack or something. And we can do what we can to get you working though. But it's very, very important though that GitHub works, or that, first of all, you have a GitHub account, but also that you can use Git. But I promise you though, there are many, many facets of Git, but I promise you we're only actually going to be using a very small number of those commands in this course. And so you'll be typing these commands in your sleep. And by the by, every time you get a lab, I'll be giving you this, those commands that you need to actually get that repository over and then to send it back. Are there any questions? Okay. If there are any questions, please let me know, and I'll be glad to help out. Now, I'm going to go back to my slides here. or rather, I'm going to go back to the website, and then I'm going to find the slides wherever they disappear to. And so these are the slides. And so what I'm going to do is I'll just have these slides. I'm going to read these PDF files or slides on my browser here, but that doesn't mean that you have to use your browser. In fact, you can use seemingly whatever technology you want, as long as you can see all of this stuff right here. Anyway, so this is data analytics here. I'm looking forward to a great semester here. I will say, though, that this semester is going to be a little bit weird. That is that we're all here worrying about social distancing. We're wearing our face masks. We have all these things going on in our heads. But I think that we'll get through it. I think that we'll have a great year here. I will meet you halfway. You just have to come the other halfway and meet me. And I'm sure that we can get through this class, but not just get through the class, but we can enjoy this course. And data analytics is one of those things that really speaks to my heart here, because this is what I did when I went through graduate school. I mean, this is the numbers that I dream in numbers, basically. I dream in binary. But the thing is, though, that when I was in graduate school, I spent a lot of time doing data analytics here, and I found it very, very rewarding. And so, in spite of these masks, in spite of the COVID-19 scares, in spite of all the distance, spatial, or these things that we have to adhere to, we are still going to enjoy this class. I'm going to enjoy this class, and I think that you'll enjoy this class too. And so, I'm looking forward to a terrific semester here. All right. And so, if there are any questions here, I do expect you all to say something. Let me know. I'm not going to invent questions for you, because it's a capital mistake to theorize without data. And so if I don't have the data from your questions, I'm not going to invent some of these things. So I do expect you, though, to ask me these questions as they come up, because in the past, this is I think the fourth time I've taught this course, in the past I've noticed that some of the students who have questions but they don't ask them, as time moves on, then it becomes much harder for them to understand what's going on. I don't think this class is a difficult course, and I'll make it as simple as I can. I think the difficulty comes in actually interpreting the results that you see. So I want you to think in terms of like questioning. Question everything. Ask questions, especially your results. But you can always ask questions in the class, and I'll be very glad to have them. Anyway, that's my monologue for that. Let's move on. Now, when last we got together here, I was showing you, I was talking about these websites that we're going to be analyzing here, and the data that comes from them. In fact, these are the slides that I actually put in your last slide deck here. And so if you click on this link here, it will take you, hopefully this will work here. Okay. It takes you to something called Yandex Metrica. Yandex Metrica is a data analyst tool. Basically, it's an analytics tool you'd use for websites. Now, why would I care about my website being analyzed? Why would I need to know how many people are on my website? Is that just to make me feel better? That, it's like I have, today I have this many likes and tomorrow I have that many, or I can expect this many other likes. And is that to make me feel somehow more important? No, certainly not. Your business depends on the fact that your website is being used, that people are able to find their way through it and to get the information that they need, and to actually use your services or order your services. It's extremely important here. And so the website that you put together, though, is actually, in many cases, for many businesses, it's an investment. They don't just think of it as like, oh, I'm just going to put together a website this weekend and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. No. It's not that at all. This is an investment. This is your face online. And so you want to make sure that your website looks really, really cutting edge. But how do you find out whether your website's performing according to what you want it to do? You have this. You have the something like these, like Yandex Metrica, where you can look through and you can see, for instance, online right now, I'm looking down here. We can see what I'm pointing at. I wish that this was a bit more dark. But I can see, for instance, in this user's blank here, or this user's chart, I can see that right now there are 2,600 users on my website. That's good. Or is it? Maybe my website was actually designed to attract 30,000. Is there something wrong? Did I have a crash? Are my websites not working? Are there links that are disconnected? Did something go wrong where people are just not sticking around to my website because of something wrong? And so this is crucial for a business, startups especially, because they have no reputation and they are found online by using searches. And so you have, in these types of analyses here, you have, or in these plots here, you have all kinds of different pieces of information about your website. I will say one thing that's actually quite important, and that is that when you are driving your car, there's not one gauge that tells you about the health of your car. There's not one gauge that tells you what the radiator is doing, what the gas is doing, how much air in your tires you have, if the radio is too loud, if you're swerving while you're driving, if you need to stop and get a cup of coffee. Modern cars actually do suggest, or they do detect when you're swerving from lane to lane. There is not one marker that does that. Instead, you have several different things, several different signals on your dashboard that tell you all kinds of things. Your website is no different. You will have, when you put together your analysis for your website, you're going to be looking at many different areas or different plots, different statistics about your website to determine whether or not it's behaving according to plan. I just want to take you through a few of these things here, and I hope that you've had some time maybe over the weekend, or you will have some time later on, to kind of stand back and kind of observe the majesty of the data that you get from your websites here. But basically, though, we have, I think this is actually the most interesting part right down here. If you look at this donut graph here, and hopefully, I wish I can get all this up on the same screen there. Can I actually shrink this down a bit, perhaps? Maybe I can. It's a little bit small, but maybe that's okay. So basically what you have here is this donut graph here, or this pie chart. This is talking about, for instance, the people who've actually come to your website. This is actually a very important piece. How do they find you? Did your ad campaign work? Let's say last week I put a whole bunch of ads on Facebook. Did anybody use any of those ads to get here? No. Okay, well maybe I won't go back to Facebook and buy more ads. But I do find that when people went to, when they typed in a Google search for the services that I'm providing, they found me that way. So maybe, for instance, that informs me that I don't need to worry about buying ads on Facebook. And so what I'm saying, though, is that these numbers translate to savings in your business. You can save a whole bunch of money, and you can become much more competitive. Now, I think that for Amazon, they were also very good at making sure that they were at the forefront of the internet movement here, which means that back in the .com days, they were able to make sure that their name was up there, that people recognized them, that they had something that, or they had some kind of when people did a search for buying things online, that Amazon popped up. And so that's really the result of spending hours and hours and days, maybe months, of looking at these numbers here and trying to figure out how to make the website better to increase these numbers. After all, these are the numbers that you'd use to make sure that your website is actually performing correctly. You do have a bunch of other information here, which is interesting. So, for instance, getting back to this data source, you have, for instance, this is how people got there. They had linked or link traffic. That means that somebody put a link in some website, and somebody clicked on it, and they got in there that way. That's how they found this, the website for this. This actually, the website we're looking at now, I think the Yandex Metrica, I think this is the website to their service that they're selling, which is basically analysis, or an analysis tool. And so you have like these other things. You can see how basically what interests drove them to get here. So this over here, this direct traffic, this link over here says that people actually typed in Yandex.com and they got here. And so that tells you not just that people typed in something in their browser, but rather it tells you that, for instance, that your name is recognized in some sense because people just typed in your name and they got and they got your website that way. I mean, how cool would that be if they just type in Wes and now they're in. They know who you are. They just type in Wes and they can look you up because they have recognition of your name. Now that's a good thing. You want to have that number increasing, but you also have, like, for instance, link traffic, where that means that you have like basically collaborators or people who like your services, and that's word of mouth. They're suggesting that your services be used. Over here, this is search engine traffic. This is really when people sat down and said, I'm looking for a tool that does data analysis. What can I use? And these are the suggestions that they probably got from Google or Yahoo or DuckDuckGo or Bing or any of those websites. The ad traffic, this is also an important statistic too. And by the way, all these statistical analysis software suites for websites, they all have the same type of information here. The difference is how they relay it. And I think that this is a good site to look at there because everything is more or less in your face on the first page here, which is nice. And you have these big bright graphics that are actually quite nice to look at. You have ad traffic. That basically says, did people click on the ad that you put out there? On Facebook, you said, are you looking for a better analysis here? click here. Did people click? Well, it says here that of your traffic over the last, you can see over here, the week, you can't really see it, but where that time is up here, I don't know if you can see this, I think the last week, that's suggesting that the last week, your ad traffic, 8.3% paid off. That means that whatever ads you bought last week that were aired last week or that were put online last week, 8.3% of them worked, I would say. And then you have this last thing here called internal traffic, which is basically, for instance, that's other types of information that somehow made other kinds of link ups that made it to your website. It could be, for instance, people who are using intranets or other types of services where they're able to go through some kind of software system to link to something else, which eventually sent out a ping to this service over here and pulled the information back to where it was supposed to go. And so it's that kind of thing here. It's miscellaneous. And then this is truly miscellaneous where, who knows how you got there. Maybe there's some kind of internet roulette where you just like ended on a website and here you go. Another thing I want to talk to you about there, and we'll go through these in more detail, but this is you have these statistics here called bounce rate, 38.5. I wish that these colors were darker on this website. I just can't. Anyway, but bounce rate on the left side, or sorry, the right-hand side there. Okay. But the bounce rate though basically says how many people went to your website, looked around for a second, and then left. It's kind of like if you're going shopping and you go into a store and let's say that you're going to, in fact, let's say you're going to go and buy milk or something. You go to the supermarket and you look at the milk and you think, oh, this is all this low-fat milk, or this is all the heavy cream milk. I can't use this milk. This isn't the milk that I need. So then you leave. You don't buy anything. And so that is basically a high bounce rate. That's like you have bounced out of the store. You went there, you spent a moment there, either you found what you're looking for or you didn't find what you're looking for, but you left. Now, you're probably thinking, well, that's good though, right? You want people to leave your store after a while. Well, not really, because part of the selling part here is that if you were Amazon, and I keep pushing Amazon here, and I don't want to make it seem like I work for Amazon. I do not work for Amazon. I'm not pushing them on you. But if you're Amazon, you have so much stock available for sale online. You want people to buy one thing and then to kind of hang around for a while. Maybe they'll buy something else. Maybe they'll decide, oh, hey, look, I could get this. I could get that too. Okay, although I only came here to buy a mouse, but now I'm going to buy a new desk, a couch. I'll buy this, and I'll buy that, and a fish tank. All this stuff that I never knew that I really wanted, but now that I've seen it there, I'm going to buy it. And so the bounce rate there would be kind of low because you're saying that somebody bought something, but they still stuck around and kept doing business. And so that's what you want. However, if you have a website where you're just offering like information, like some kind of the times, for instance, for a restaurant opening or closing or whatever it is, one of those kinds of things, you kind of expect people to log in, check the time at the restaurant or check the address, and then to get out of there because they're not going to hang around because that means they're hopefully on their way to the brick and mortar restaurant where they can buy some nice dinner. So you have some other things here too, and that's basically like it's similar to this like time on the site here, where of all the people who logged in last week, you can see that in spite of their bounce rate here, when they didn't just leave, if they hung around in general for about 1 minute and 19 seconds, in general. Which you want to know that because if you're selling many, many, many different products, you kind of want people to hang around your website as long as possible if you're selling things. Or, for instance, if you have a blog where you want people to sit around and read your stories or your blogs, you might want people to click on one link, but then to move on to another thing and click another thing and just keep clicking around and kind of taking in the services that your website is putting together. And so that's really some of the very basic types of statistics that you would have for your website here. You want to be able to see whether people are logging in and doing working on your website in the way that you expect them to be working. Otherwise, if you find that they're not logging in and working properly, if your website is not doing what it's supposed to do, then maybe, for instance, your website needs to be changed. Maybe there's some kind of an error or something. Maybe, for instance, if you find that if everybody last week who logs into our website, they spent on average 5 seconds, everybody, then that would suggest that something is really wrong here. It's a kind of a bug here. There's something that's wrong with the system. It's not performing the way it should. I expect people to spend at least 3 minutes on my website here, but these guys are spending 5 seconds. There must be something wrong. And so this is kind of, these numbers here are not just about analyses about how many or how people are using their website here, and now it's updating, but they are actually talking about, for instance, how it performs. And so, for instance, here, if I click on that link here, time on the site, and if I can move over, I guess I can't move, yes I can. Can I see? Okay. So time on the site, I can see these are the days that run along the x-axis, and the times run along the y-axis, up and down. And so, as I move across this graph here, I can see that it looks like I had fewer people, or let's see, I had people spent less time on the 9th, was it September 5th, I guess. I think that's right, it's year, month, than day. And so it looks like people spent less time on my website on the 5th. You might think to yourself, well, why was that? Maybe there's, you might ask yourself, why was that? Let me just make a point here, and I'll be making this point again and again and again, and that is that this data doesn't tell you why. It doesn't say why. It just says that there was something that happened. It's like when you look at your shadow as you're walking down the street, you look down at your feet and you see your shadow on you. It doesn't tell you what you look like. It just says that there is somebody there. I mean, we all know that shadow you see down there is you. That belongs to you. But actually, though, you have to take that on at face value here, if you will. No pun intended here, because you cannot see a face in your shadow. You cannot see any detail. You just see an outline. This is exactly the same here too. These data analytics tools that we talk about in this class, whether it's in database, or sorry, whether it's analysis for the websites here, or whether it's analysis in other areas too, it doesn't tell us why. We will never know that. All it does is it tells you that something weird has happened, and then you, as the analyst or the data scientists, need to move forward and find out what caused that. You just hear a bump in the night, or you just see a dip in the plot. It doesn't tell you what caused that. And so that's actually a very important point to make here, because each time I read, it seems like each day, when I read some kind of paper where some kind of analysis is being done, people will pull out some kind of number, and then they start extrapolating reasons for that number to be the way it is. Oh, right, well, we have this many cases of COVID today, which is down from yesterday. It must signify blah, blah, blah. We don't know that. We don't know any of this stuff. All we know is that the cases are not as high today as they were yesterday. We need to go back and find out why. Find out what it is that made that change. And then once you have that, sometimes once you have real kind of proof of why that change occurred, then you have to test it. So it's not just inferring, oh, well, I guess today we're lucky or something, because it doesn't work that way. The data just says that something happened. And so up here, the data here suggests that something was going on, but we have no idea what happened at all. We might infer that maybe this was Saturday, and so maybe it was nice and sunny in most of the places where the people were living. Maybe they went outside. They didn't want to spend all the time online here. And maybe, for instance, now that we're at these places here, maybe people are more likely to be checking this website at work. Who knows? They're already indoors. So what I'm trying to say, though, getting back to our slides here, what I'm trying to say is that we have a number of different types of ways of interpreting the results from these websites here. Another thing you can look at here is, for instance, there's Matomo dashboard. If I click on that, hopefully it'll come up. It's slow, I think. Okay. It's very much the same kind of thing here. It plots and data and numbers and talks about, for instance, oh, this is actually nice. Here we have a visitor map. I always enjoy looking at this here to see, for instance, where people are logging in from. So if I say that, I can see that there is, what's the time frame on this one here? I'm guessing the time is about a week. It's usually about a week, unless you set it differently. But I can click on the map of America here, and I can see, for instance, that in general, and I hate to keep having to, it's kind of hard to see. It seems like in general, most of my visits were coming from California. Oops, I'm sorry, guys, I can't see that. You can't see that because my face is in the way. Bummer. Anyway, if you click on the same link, though, you'll see what I mean by that. I think that, in fact, maybe I can move my face away a little bit here, just so it's not like on. I can move my face away so that it's not in your face. If that makes any sense at all. Hopefully that's better. That's better. Okay, so I think you get the point here. And so what we're talking about today is I think we'll use the same slide deck for both days, today and on Thursday. And so we will be kind of coming back to all of these ideas that we just mentioned here. This is a broad nutshell of what I've just discussed here. I'm going to spend some time now to actually go through each of these areas and kind of extrapolate some ideas that, how do we think about these data points here. One thing that I think is actually kind of interesting here, I don't see it here, but I saw it in the one before. Let me just go back to this website over here. I just wanted to point this out. It's not moving very quickly here. Ah, here we go. Age. Look at that. Age. This is saying that of my website here, the most common people who logged in were ages 25 to 34. How do they know that? Did anybody type in their age this morning when they logged into any website? No. So how do they know that? What do you guys think? Tiana, you know these things. How would a website like this guess your age, do you think? Yes. So Tiana says, rightly enough, it's about the content that each of these users is using. That is absolutely correct. They are inferring, based on the cookies that you have in your computer, or the cookies in your cookie jar, the cookies in your computer. They're guessing that since you spent a lot of time looking at mountain bikes in the last couple of weeks here, there's a lot of cookies for Trek and and Schwinn and some of these other places. They're thinking that since you've been going to a lot of these bike websites, you must be young enough to be able to get on a bike and keep up some speed here. You're probably not a 70-year-old, or you're probably a young person looking for a bike. And so they infer things. That is an ethical issue that we're going to be discussing in this course, simply because in some ways you could argue that that's a kind of a prejudice here. They're prejudiced. They think, oh, well, you're young, you're probably on your bike, you probably don't care about anything else other than getting on your bike and blah, blah, blah. But that's not really what people are like. I mean, everyone is unique. We all have things that make us unique and different and special. I know that sounds kind of silly, but we are. We're all special. And you cannot just take one person and lump them into a bin with a bunch of other people. It just seems like there's just too many factors involved here. But for these websites here, when you look at the ages here, they essentially do that because they have algorithms. And those algorithms were designed by people who may themselves have faults, which they put into code. And so what I'm trying to say, though, is in this course, we're going to be spending a lot of time looking at some of those algorithmic mistakes that may have been made that might lump people together to say that they are a particular kind of person. So I think that that's enough said for now. But stay tuned, though, because when you look at some of these kinds of brackets here, it doesn't necessarily, they're guessing your age on data that they believe is indicative of your kind of your age here. Otherwise, they have more information about here. For instance, if you look over next to it, you find, for instance, they have information about how you logged into the website, PC, smartphones, tablets, TV. If you're designing a website here, it means that basically for the PC, you better be very, very sure that your code runs on a PC, and more or less sure that it works on a smartphone, a tablet, sure, TV. Well, if they don't get to that today, I'll do it tomorrow. It's that kind of thinking here. So that's how you should design your code so that it's able to reach out and connect with those kinds of technologies here. Anyway, I think that perhaps I've made enough fuss on this, about this whole thing here. This is kind of like giving you, it's foreshadowing. We're going to be talking about how these systems work, moving on down some of these other statistics here as we move on down the class here. But basically, though, in this slide here, in our slide deck, these are the kinds of questions you might be asking of your website. How do I explain my users here? How can I get more information about the users' visits? How can I maybe understand their experience, as you call it, their experience on the website? Where did my visitors go? In that case, for instance, if I have if my whole website is designed to do one thing, and I find that that none of my users are going to that page where that one thing can be done, then that informs me that maybe it's too complicated in my website. Maybe it's not working very well, or maybe there's something else. And so I need these are like statistics I can use to kind of figure out how I can improve things. So this is the statistics for traffic source, but you're able to kind of like ask many different questions here. But the thing is, though, that the talent from the computer or the data scientist or the analyst, the talent comes in basically inferring what these numbers means, what they mean in terms of the people who work, or the people that are logging into your website. As always, you're looking to see. So what we're talking about today is basically Google Analytics. Google Analytics is actually it's a very straightforward system of being able to like kind of ask questions of your website here. Now, I will take you through one more step here, and that is that in many cases, Google Analytics is another Google service, and that means that they are collecting data about you as you're collecting data about your website. And so I know that sounds really paranoid, but if that bothers you, then you can go to the other services that we have before, like for instance, these two that we were just looking at. And I think that these are open source projects where you just install the software yourself and you can run these things and then you become the presider over your data. But it's difficult to install those things sometimes because you have to configure everything. Whereas Google Analytics, they have an easy install going for them. It's very, very simple to install this stuff. And so in this class, I'm not pushing Google Analytics. I think that for your own careers, for your own web pages, for the things that you do, you have to decide for yourselves what technology you want. And I'm not going to tell you that one is better than the other, but I'm telling you what's there. And then you have to actually go back and decide, well, okay, I don't mind if Google's watching my website. I don't mind if they're watching my traffic. I don't mind if they're collecting data. Fine. But I will show you like kind of like how to read the information here. So just keep that in mind, though, that there are selections of software that you can use. So Google is good at basically analyzing the website traffic here. It has what's called conversion tracking here. Conversions are basically, if you are a company that sells something online, making a sale is a conversion. That means you've converted the customer or the website person over to the way that you want them to convert. You want them, or the way that you want them to think. They've either downloaded your website or your blog, or they've downloaded your newsletter, they've read your newsletter, or they have donated money to your cause, they've bought something from you. Conversions. And so Google Analytics spends a lot of time looking at how many people actually buy things on your website. That's one of the things that you can configure, because you'd use this for your business. You want to make sure that people are actually using your website to buy things. But basically, what it's doing is it's watching whether the goals of your website have been completed appropriately, whether they have been completed by the people who are logging in. And if the goals are not being completed, then you see that in your data, that, wait a minute, people are not doing on my website what I want them to do. You have e-commerce here, which basically is knowing how your ads are doing. You can watch the ads that you're buying. And the reason for that is because Google wants you to have a finger on the ad pulse, so that you can see how the money that you're spending on Google, how it's doing. Another thing you want to find out is where the visitors are coming from, because that informs about where your markets are, like where the markets physically are located. If you find that, for instance, you're selling soap, and people are more likely to buy this soap in, say, on the East Coast than the West Coast, then maybe that would tell you that maybe it's easier to make money on the East Coast, where people buy the soap anyway, than if you're going to sell things on the West Coast, because maybe there's competition there. But again, it comes from the talent, where you have to kind of infer what could explain these numbers. You don't know. And I don't want anyone here to think here that the numbers explain everything, or the numbers tell you why. It does not. There's no causality here. You have to actually, you see, for instance, a shadow of something in here, and then you have to go after and find out what that shadow is actually connected to. And that is how you actually do your analysis. So see, first of all, in your plot, in your data, that something has changed, and then you have to go in and find a way of explaining that change, and that is the hard part. And I find that most articles I read, they don't do that. They don't explain, or they don't go back and check, but whatever. I know I sound disgruntled, I'm really not, but I just think that for you, though, you're going to be going out into the real world. You will be answering the call for many big questions out there. And to answer this question, to figure out what to do, you'll be studying data. And so not on my watch. I don't want any of my class to go out there and to kind of confuse causality with a blip on their screen. You need to know that it's just a blip on your screen, and you have to explain it. You have to explain it. And that means you have to find other ways of doing it and run other tests and do other types of analyses here. It becomes research. You can also find out, for instance, like what kind of browsers that they're using and etc. So there's a bunch of stuff that you can learn from looking at website traffic here. But I think, though, that one of the most important pieces here is that finding out the geographical locations of people when they're coming in. That informs of your market space. You can also find out about these direct searches, as we discussed before. Do people actually type in your name in their website, or in their browser? In other words, are you a household name? Did someone refer you to them? Were you a referral? In other words, where maybe you weren't a household name to person A, but person B you were, and person B spoke to person A and gave your name to them. And so in other words, that means your name is getting around. That's good. Maybe that's your ad campaign is working. Who knows? And then you might want to know, for instance, what pages do they look at on your website? Do they check out that page that had all my latest jokes? No? Well, that's interesting. What could that be? So you have these kinds of things that people can look at, and I think that's. I need to close my messenger here. So I have a bunch of things that and there are many different reasons why you'd want to have some kind of analysis on your website here. And then this balancing thing we discussed earlier, but how much time did they spend at your website before they left? Now let's talk about this conversions pieces here. Now conversions, I would say, are probably one of the more important pieces of your website here because remember that you don't usually design. I mean, if you're a hobbyist, you might, but you don't really just design a website just for the fun of it and hoping that people will just log in and spend as much time as they can on this thing and read over your things and then leave. Typically what happens is you'll design a website, and on your website you're going to have something you want people to do. You want them to, I don't know, download your newsletter, or to give you money to your cause, or to buy something. It has a purpose. There's a real goal involved in your website here. And so this conversion business here is kind of tracking to see whether the people who logged into your website actually did go through and do what you want them to do. Did they actually follow through and complete the goal of your website, where they are, when they are buying the thing that you're selling, downloading the thing that you want them to download, or reading the stuff that you want them to read. And so this conversions is actually a very big piece of why you'd want to use analysis here. So the questions that you'd ask would be these kinds of questions here, where you might want to ask, what pages did they click on here? What page views? Now each person, when they log in, they'll be clicking on one thing, and they want to see kind of like what pages they went after, because that will help you to kind of figure out where the popular areas of your website are. It also, just incidentally, it'll tell you that, for instance, maybe the pages that nobody is clicking on, maybe the links aren't working. Maybe they can't get to those pages. In fact, this has happened. One of my students in this course, when I taught it my second time, they said that they had put together a website for their business. They were selling clothing that they had designed themselves, and they said that they never realized that there was a problem in their website, and that is that one of the links didn't work to take people to buy certain types of T-shirts. And so he said that he was looking through his numbers here, and he thought, it's funny how all these people are going to these other pages, but I'm getting 0 hits on this particular page over here. So he looked into it more deeply. Again, he saw the blip on his screen. He looked into it more deeply and found out that the reason was that the link that was taking people from the main page to the T-shirt page was broken. Amazing, isn't it? Just a few numbers, analysis like that will help you debug your website here. So then you can find another conversions. Questions would be like, how many people purchase things here? How many times they click on the purchase buttons? How many users downloaded something here, or they read, or they viewed your newsletters? If the newsletter is the goal of your system here. How long did it take people to get to your checkout page? That's an important piece. If you have a page or a website that sells many things, you want them to hang around, but you do want them to get to that checkout page. Otherwise, they don't buy anything. And you might want to know about how much time it took them to buy something. And if you know how much time it took them to buy something, then that might help you to, maybe if it takes them too long, if you imagine, then maybe you need to change your, the flash and the bling and all that stuff you have on your website to encourage people to buy things sooner. Yeah. So and then see how has a specific number of people done something in some allotted time on the site? What kind of, well, really, what kind of activity are people doing? Are the people using your site for what you wanted them to use it for? The next thing I mentioned here was called, and by the way, are there any questions at all? If you do have questions, I can't always see the chat, but if you do have questions, please just let me know, and I'm just unmute and just get my attention somehow, and let me know, and I'll be there. I don't want to just, I like to think of this as a discussion here. It's not just me talking the entire hour here. Okay, so e-commerce is all about business. Is your website making money for you? Is it basically able to fulfill the online shopping goals that you have? Are you able to? Is your website able to kind of like attract the customers and have them buy things? And so really, that e-commerce, it's all about this shopping and customers and business to business, and what demographic areas are they where that business is being done, and are you able to market to specific populations? For instance, are you marketing special sizes of T-shirts to people who wear those T-shirts? I mean, if you're selling children's clothing, then it would make sense to be selling to maybe young parents or new parents here who have children at home. You wouldn't want to spend a lot of money marketing your children's clothing line to an older generation who have no children. So you're looking at specific populations here. Now, I know that this specific populations does sound at the surface to be an unethical, kind of a biased thing here, but it does make sense though that if you have a product to sell, certain types of people buy those products. Let's see here. I think I'm going to move on to the next here. Engaging in pre-tail for launching new products. This pre-tail is a kind of it's a word. It's a kind of a buzzword, but it basically means like how much kind of excitement do you have to put out to make people want to go after your products. It's very exciting. Excuse me. Then we have, like, for instance, then we have like the data collection here. One of the problems is that in the old days, before you had these really advanced analytical systems here, you'd have a survey. I mean, who likes answering surveys? The other day I had an email that says, please answer our survey. It'll only take you about 25 to 28 minutes long to complete the survey. I thought to myself, delete. Nope. I don't care who you. Oh, you're with that. Oh, I know that company. Delete. It's like I don't care. I don't have 25 minutes to 28 minutes. I think that's insulting, actually. Who needs that extra? Who needs that extra 3 minutes? Everybody gets 25 minutes except for me, who I need an extra 3 minutes to answer my survey. No. But I don't do surveys because I just don't have time for these things. And so it makes sense that rather than asking people to rate this site as you used to see back in the old days, now people don't have to worry about doing any surveys. Instead, they just kind of click around the website and their survey is kind of created dynamically for them, which is akin to, for instance, you're at the supermarket and you're walking around and you pick up some kind of product and someone immediately rushes over and they look at you and they look at the product and they write down the product name and they look at their watch and they figure out how much time you spent looking at the product. And then when you put it back on the shelf, then they kind of they click their stopwatch here. They figure out, okay, you spent 30 seconds looking at this ramen noodle box here, whatever it is. I guess maybe you're not interested in those ramen noodles, but you did spend some other time looking at these other ramen noodles. It's like they're watching everything you do. And that gets annoying here. But that's exactly what happens online. Everything you click on, everything you look at, everything you do is being somehow sent into some kind of analytical analyzing software base that's going to be looking at your data. So anyway, analytics allows web builders, though, to not have to ask these reaching survey questions here, but just go ahead and watch people interact with the website and to get the feel for how things are happening. This is all good for productivity, business development, site intuition. Site intuition is actually a very big piece here, because if you find that people are spending too much time on particular site or particular pages of the site, then you can infer that perhaps it's just too confusing. They don't know where the buttons are they're supposed to be clicking on. I mean, we've all been there, where we've been on a website here where it says, okay, now I want you to click on the such and such button. You're like, where do I find that? Well, then you find out actually that button that they're talking about is at the end of 2 other clicks on some drop-down menu. And so that's confusing, and you don't want your customers to be confused because they have a tendency to log out and not do business with you if they don't like your website. Nobody likes to be called a fool. And for instance, then you have some other stuff here. So I'm going to move on here to the default reports here. So when you first establish a Google Analytics account here, as we'll do, your default reports, in other words, Google Analytics has many, many things going for it. It has many different ways of analyzing data from your website. But they do give you some basic kind of out-of-the-box analyses here. And that is that you have real-time usage, which allows you to see right now who's on my website. At this very moment, is somebody doing any shopping? And in fact, that real-time usage, if I can go back to here, I'll just reset this thing here. Visitors in real time, that's what they say here. But you have, it's up here someplace. In the last 30 minutes, here we go. In the last 30 minutes on this website, 191 people have visited this website. And so maybe that's a good thing. Maybe in 30 minutes, in the last 30 minutes, maybe that's a number that you expect. Maybe it isn't. It's up to you. You have to kind of get to know your website to know. But that's what Google Analytics provides to you. They provide information about the audience. And how do they know that? Because they're watching everything that audience clicks on. There's a double click, and there's cookies left behind. And so when you log into some of these websites here, they're actually scanning through your cookies to find out what you've been looking at. You know, I'll tell you, I used to work at, kind of a story here, but I used to work, when I was doing my master's is in mathematics. It was actually called, something called information theory. But when I did my master's here, I didn't pay for my master's. In fact, I got a kind of a fellowship where, in fact, it's very easy. If I can do this, anyone can. It's not, anyone can do this. Anyone. But I was teaching math there, and the thing is that we had to wear these like bright red T-shirts that had like our name tag right here, and you basically wear that. You'd wear like, you know, maybe beige pants, and that was the uniform that we had to wear when we taught this math class. And we all wore these pants. Well, I never really realized that this beige pants and a red shirt was exactly the same thing that they would wear at Target. You know, Target, we have one in Erie, not one here. And so when I went to after work one day, I went shopping at Target. I'm still wearing my red shirt and my beige pants here. And when I went there, I was surprised that like people kept asking me where things were in Target. I was like, I'm here, I'm just shopping and getting my milk and getting some crackers and some bread and some things. And people kept coming up to me and saying, hey buddy, where can I find Lysol? Hey buddy, where can I find toothpaste? I'm like, I got over there. Just go check it out. Well, that was because they were looking at what I was wearing, and they were saying, oh, well, you're a Target person. But actually, I wasn't working there. But what I'm saying is that when you go to websites, though, the websites that you bump into, the websites you click on, they look at your cookies, and it's the same thing. They look at all your cookies, and they think, oh, well, you've been here and here and here and here. Therefore, you must be blank. You must be this person. And so the audience information that you're getting right here, what types of users tend to use your site, that information comes from kind of looking at the people on face value here and saying, oh, well, these are the cookies you have on your computer. Therefore, you must be this kind of person. I mean, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I'm not saying that it's always a bad thing, but sometimes it does help. But it helps to know, for instance, I think, how they know who you are. Now we have this acquisition here. This is another thing that Google just gives you. How do users get to your site? You need to know that, because if it's getting to your site by clicking on your ads or by referrals or by just typing in like organic searches, basically, then it helps to know the behavior, what the people do when they're there, and whether or not they did the thing you wanted them to do. Did they go after the goals? And so this is the Google Analytics page here. Later on, I don't know later on we'll have some time to put some of these things up here. But this is what the page is going to look like here, where you have these kinds of charts here. It's actually quite nice here. In the lower right, you have a map where you can actually see where people are clicking in from. And it's actually quite exciting though, because I would see that like before the semester began, I put a website out there for what was it? One of our projects that we're doing for Mozilla. We have a Mozilla grant where we're putting ethics into our curriculum, and over the summertime here, when I gave a presentation to some of the other Mozilla, basically the suits, the people with the money who gave us this money to put this ethical curriculum together, I gave a presentation to them on behalf of our Mozilla fellows to tell them, basically what we're doing here at Allegheny College. And after that presentation, I noticed that people were beginning to click on our website. And I could see that. I could see basically where these people were living. Basically, there's a map down here. You can't really see this, but this is a map. You could see on the map of America here, you can see what states they're coming from. Many people from California, some people from I guess Seattle around there in Washington, which is cool. Next we have here, for instance, in Google Analytics, is we have, and we will be playing with this. Don't worry. These are just slides here, but we will be playing with some of this stuff here. But we have the audience. We have information here about we can see who the audience members actually were. So, like for instance, right down here, I can see that. What am I seeing here? These are two different types of people here. Oh, from session A and session B. So I can compare. And this I'm actually checking to see. I've defined in this case here, or Google's rather defined, two different types of people in this website. Maybe your definition is by age here, for instance, and you're seeing whether people of a certain age or whether or they log in at a certain time, how they compare, how the different groups compare. So you can actually run analyses inside analyses here. We'll get to all this stuff in a bit here. I just want to kind of move on. Then we have the acquisitions. For instance, you can see like what kinds of searches they did to get to your website. That's important. You can see down at the bottom here, on the lower part of down here, if you can see my mouse there. But basically, at the bottom of the page here, you can see kind of like how they found their way to your website. And when they say in Google, when they say organic search, it means that somebody actually typed in www.allegheny.edu. They typed that in. So they must have known what that address was. But if it's a referral, they might have been clicking on some college website which said, here's a liberal arts college in Meadville, Pennsylvania. Click here and you find your way to Allegheny. Now, this suggests that each time you click on something, then you're not just clicking on a link, but actually you're clicking on a link that comes with metadata. And so that metadata that it comes with basically comes through saying, I was clicked in this way here. I have this kind of this was the piece of, or this was how I became a link. And so you have that information that comes through that Google picks up on. Here we are. These are the site arrivals here. And so that metadata informs about the organic searches, whether it's typed in your name, whether it's a paid search, whether there was an ad that they clicked on, whether it was a direct, whether it came from some kind of referral source, I guess, or maybe, for instance, they clicked on something or they copied and pasted something in, I guess. The organic search is actually going to Google and doing a search for your site and then finding it there and clicking on the site that Google gives you. So that's the organic searches really means you're using some kind of search base. But direct in this case means you just type in the website and then you're there. Referrals, they came to your website from another website. Social means basically in this rubric is that maybe there's an ad on Facebook pages and you click on that and that takes you to a real page not on Facebook pages, but the real page. And then you have, for instance, some other parameters here, like some other way of connecting to the system here, some other way of getting there. But also, though, you want to know what the users are doing on your site, and I wish the graphics were a little bit better. Maybe you can see this on your own screen. Up here, the colors are pretty bad here, if you can't really see. But the on the page, for instance, information in the middle of the screen here on the slide, the behavior will suggest, will tell you what pages they tend to go to. So the first on this list here under the page area, I don't know if you can see that. You probably can't see it. I can't point this here, but on that list under page there, for instance, that slash means the root. That means that everybody arrived there. And then on that page, you have links to other pages on your site. And so these other places here on this list are those pages that people are clicking on. Now, these pages in this case are PHP files and some other things. But actually, though, they represent the website components themselves. And so you can look at this, this list of files here and say, oh, this person went to my search, and they probably did a search for some product that I'm selling. Or this person over here went to my my blog, and so they probably were reading my blogs. And so you have a bunch of kind of different pages that you could look at to kind of get an idea about the activity or what people did when they were on your site here. Here I just have some information about what these different pieces mean. Page views, unique page views. Page views, I'll just read this, an instance of a page being loaded. That means that when somebody logs in, they click on something on your website, they're viewing that page. Now, the difference between page views and unique page views is that you have this metadata that concerns the IP address. And so that means if somebody who comes to your system all the time, like they always come to your system, they always read the news or they read something else, then they're basically being, they're a local to your website here. But and so you could see kind of like what they're clicking on. But unique page views, that suggests that those are new people who you haven't seen on your website before. But I should say that it doesn't necessarily mean that these people are brand new. It means that the person's using a browser that doesn't have a cookie that suggests that they've been to your website before. And so that's kind of a problem here, because you don't know whether they've cleaned out their cookies or whether they're using a different browser. It could be the same physical person, just using a different machine. And so this unique page views and page views, you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt in some cases here, because you don't know whether, for instance, the people that you're looking at have been there before, or whether they just if they have not been there before. You don't know if that's really true, and so you can just infer things. I'm thinking that by now you're beginning to kind of get the notion that you are in data analytics here. You're just kind of inferring what's going on. You don't know exactly what's going on here. You're basically putting together, if you will, some evidence to suggest what's going on here. But you won't know exactly what's going on, and that's why they call this statistics, because you're kind of taking a sample size of something and kind of using this to extrapolate some kind of meaning to the rest of the population. And here you'll find there are many problems in any kind of analytics operation where, for instance, you don't know exactly whether, if it says it's unique, you don't know whether they really are unique. So I know that this is a very basic concept here, but I'm actually talking to the idea that you, in other types of analyses here, you just have evidence to suggest that something's going on, but you don't really know. Unless you go out there and actually do the results, or check the results yourself and actually do the analysis here, you don't always know what the data is really telling you until you've actually looked into it further. Excuse me. Now we have the session here. This is like the amount of time here that people will stick around on your site before they become kicked off, basically. Even though the website's still running on their machine, if they haven't clicked on anything, then you could either log these people out or just say that the session is now closed. If you do like online banking, for instance, most of the time you have like 5 minutes, and if you haven't clicked on the website or haven't done anything on that website after 5 minutes, then it goes away. You get logged out. That's because the bank has said that your session lasts 5 minutes. 5 minutes of inactivity means you're done. Next, we have the average time here. This is the amount of time that all of your users over some period of time have spent on your website here. You need to know, but it's not a hard and fast rule here, and so you always have to think in terms of like, what is my website doing? Do I want people to hang around on my website and watch my videos and check things out? Or do I want people to come to my website and download something? So for instance, the average time statistic from YouTube and the average time statistic from the restaurant opening hours website, those are two entirely different ideas here. YouTube wants people to stick around on their website all day, if possible, all week, all year, if they possibly can. But for the restaurant, though, you don't want people logging onto your website and then and staying there. You want them to kind of realize that you're open. Okay, I'm going to go there. I'll go there now. And then they go to the restaurant. They log out and they go there. And so the average time information here is not a hard and fast rule. And you must always think in terms of what are the goals of your website when you're analyzing or when you're considering these statistics here. The bounce rate, I've alluded to that before, where the bounce rate is basically saying how much time did people stick around on your website before they decided that they had basically had enough and they left. I guess they call that in the physical world, they call that bulking. When you go into a store, for instance, and you find out if there's a long line, you might just leave. I'm not going to wait in line here. I don't have time for this. And so then you leave. And so that's bulking. And so your bounce rate is kind of like your digital version of bulking, where people come and then they leave. And then exit. It indicates how often users exit from a page or a set of pages that they viewed. In other words, if you infer, when you go to some news websites, for instance, it'll say, here's an article. It's basically a 10-minute read. You can read this thing and it takes you 10 minutes. That means that somebody's actually figured out that to read this website read this page here. It'll take about 10 minutes to get this whole thing, or to get this, to read the article here. And so we anticipate that people will spend about 10 minutes here. Now, if someone logs into my articles and they're on a 10-minute page, but they spend 30 seconds, I know that they haven't read it. I mean, maybe they copied and pasted it, sure, but I know that they probably haven't read it. And so that suggests to me that maybe my article is just not relevant to them, or they're just not interested. They just don't care about my hard work, or not. Maybe the article's awful. Conversions. This is like, again, have the goal. I don't know why they use this word conversions, but it basically means, have you converted your customer? It's almost like a religious sense. Have they been converted? Are they on your side now? Have they fulfilled the goals of your website? And so you can kind of get an idea about, over time, how many people who logged in actually did the things you want them to do. And so you can say that, for instance, I'm looking at, let me just ask this. Maybe this might be my last slide here. But in the middle of this conversions chart right here, and I hope you can all see this, but in the very, very center here, I have a whole bunch of bumps and some actually mountains and valleys. And then around January, I'm guessing maybe December, late December to early, the first week in January, I see it's flat. That means that nothing has happened. My website has not sustained any, or has not had any conversions. That means people haven't done the things. So let me ask you this. How could you explain that trend there? Everything else is ups and downs, and then we get to this late December, early January, it's flat, and then everything goes back to normal. Just throw out some ideas. What do you think? How can you explain that flat line right there? These are conversions.
Just nobody visited the website. Was just an inactive, like during that.
Yes. Okay, that's excellent. It was inactive. I would suggest that maybe this website was managed by people who went home for the holidays, or maybe on the holidays people didn't use this website because they had other things going on. How do you guys feel about that? I'm seeing some nods from my class here. So I'm thinking that this, but the point here is that nobody knows. Okay, we can spend all day talking about this, and thank you for your comment there. We can spend all day talking about what it could be, but we don't actually know until we go back and until we notice that blip, as I call it, is on our screen, and then we go back and figure out how we can explain it. And so don't try and explain something before you have the evidence, or maybe the context of that thing here, because it never seems to work out very well then. Because anytime you say, oh, I think that reason for that is because of such and such and such and such, somebody else will stand up and say, well, actually, you're wrong. I don't believe that. I think that's wrong. And then you'll find yourself in some kind of a shouting match with a bunch of other people. In fact, this is an interesting story. There's a similar kind of thing to this, where you have data that suggests a trend, and then the trend is broken, and then after some time the trend resumes. There was I went to my doctoral area was actually in bioinformatics, where I used to analyze types of proteins, whether the proteins lived or died according to certain types of ailments. One of the things I was looking at was Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And I was looking to see whether proteins, and muscular tissue too, but I was looking to see whether certain types of proteins would survive under certain conditions. And so I went to a conference where people were talking about their protein data, and they were talking about their analyses. And one person got up there and he said, for his presentation, he says, yes, I've done this research, and it can only say that this protein does not survive under these types of conditions. This kind of biological stress kills proteins. That's what it is. And then it became almost a shouting match in the conference here, because somebody else said, oh yeah, well, I have data that suggests the contrary. So how does your data explain that my data doesn't do what your data is doing? And so it went back and forth. But what I can say, though, is that when you're arguing a point with data, one thing you should really start saying is that according to this data set, I have reason to believe that this is the thing that's happening. It's like, this is what I see, and according to this data, this is what's going on. Because when you're working with biological data, it's like there's so many unusual things happening all at once here that it almost feels like as if anytime you find something, there's always an exception to not finding it. It's like kind of the learning I guess, learning English grammar rules, there is always an exception. And so in biology, there are always exceptions here. And so when you're going into your careers and you're using data to argue your points, and you see something like this, like in our conversions map here, where you have a trend interrupted and then the trend resumes. Never say I think, but just say according to the data, this the data suggests that. And that means that it's off your shoulders if something goes wrong. If someone comes after you and says, "Oh, Chiyoda, that's not right. You don't know what you're talking about." Blah, blah. You can say, "Well, this data set suggests this. Your data set suggests something else. Let's agree to disagree." And that's how you can diffuse many of these arguments that would happen in a conference setting here. We were almost afraid for our lives here, and so most of us had to like duck out of the room and go and get a cup of coffee here while this heated exchange was going on. But I've never seen people getting so worked up over proteins. But actually, the reason why they were so upset was because the protein science was actually the result of a huge grant that somebody had got, and so by them not defending their results, their grant had paid for, I guess it may have made them look bad. I think that I'm going to end this here. Next, when we come back here, we're going to, by the way, if there's any last minute questions, please let me know. But I'm going to end this here, though, because when we come back, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be actually setting up a website on Google Sites, and then we're going to connect that with analytics, and then I'm going to take you through and show you how to analyze the traffic to your very own site. And so I'm hoping that, for instance, when you create this website, you could use this. I mean, for this class, you can create this just for fun. But when you're getting ready to graduate, I'm hoping that you put together a website. And on that website, you'll have information about your projects, you'll have information about your resume, and your CV, and all that, and things that you've been doing. And so that when you're applying for jobs, you can give them this website. And then you have the analytical backbone now to see kind of like what's going on with your website. Are people clicking on it? Are people looking at it? So you can do your own analysis here and find out, is it working? You know?